Welcome back. Let's get started on our About page. But before we head over to the About page, I have opened up our index.html because as you can see within our target site, we need to adjust the header. Just a little bit. We need to get the header correct. We'll adjust the branding and the nav bar to make sure that we have the correct pages listed. To do that, simply head over to our navigation. You can see that within our plain index. Right there, everything's looking pretty good. And we want to get rid of this li and that form. I think we'll just keep this ul. So the primary unordered list, and then we have a link. It looks like we have one with a drop down. We don't really need that. We don't need a drop down for our current menu, but you could always add a drop down as you see fit. Bootstrap's neat and useful like that. So let's start editing. We'll have our home, about us page. That'll be our inner content page, our blog, and also our contact page. Once we save, clean this up just a bit, and then I will save that out. And we'll head over to our site, refresh, and there we have it. Our brand, our home, about us, blog, and contact. Well, now let's change that brand title treatment. So under our nav bar, you can find the nav bar brand and just give it the name of Clear Step. There we go. And let's also give this a title. Attribute of the very same thing, so Clear Step. Once we jump into our browser and refresh, we have our Clear Step, and we also have our tooltip, kind of our web title of Clear Step as well. That's a good practice to do with your titles, your site titles. It's important for the browser to know. The only other thing is we see that this text is centered. So it's centered almost along with our container. And that works. We can use a centered container within our header. So let's do that now. So we have all of this. One more time, find our nav. Then we can erase this comment. Right under or above nav bar header, create a div with a bootstrap class of container. In that, I have a commented version ready to go. Paste that right in, ending our container. Make sure. And we will refresh. All right, so we have our container. Let's make sure our responsive navigation is still functioning. As we go smaller, we remain nicely responsive, which is quite nice. All right. So now we can head on to customizing our About page. For our About page, we're looking for kind of a clever use of content, but a familiar enough environment so readers won't be put off by the general look of it. Well, this is a page that is meant for our clients to be able to place content in that's simply intuitive. To begin developing this out, let's head over back to our editor and open our about.html file. As you can see here, I've emptied out our container and page content. We can reuse elements of our home page because essentially we do have the same wrappers. We're just going to put different content within it. To begin our main page content, I am going to open up a new ordered list because the elements heading within this will be ordered. So open up an ordered list and we'll give that a class, a bootstrap class of breadcrumb. If you'd like to know a little bit more about the breadcrumb module, head over to the bootstrap documentation and head over to breadcrumbs. This will give us this sort of breadcrumb-like structure that's already been pre-done for us. This is excellent in both its presentation and semantics. Some people might be tempted to just place anchor tags within the breadcrumbs and maybe an unordered list because it's one of those lists that you just use all the times. But in fact, we really should use an ordered list because we're kind of going down an ordered hierarchy of pages to our current content and back up. So we're going to paste in or use this breadcrumb. And it's easy enough to just give something a class of active. You can just give that a class of active and it'll take care of all the styling within that component. So we'll open up the breadcrumbs and then we'll let our readers know where they are. Open up an li, then a with an href, and then we'll give that actually page of index.html. Since this is going to be our home page, we'll just send that home. And let's duplicate this one time. All right, looks like we've got it. And one more time, and we'll just change this over to our about, since this is going to be our about page. And you can see how maybe you could place this within another content management system like WordPress, or even just within a static site, but you're always letting the reader be aware of where they are within your website. It's good use of UI. All right, so we can head over to this and we'll head into our about.html. And so we have our footer, we have our header, and now we have our home and about. We have no border radius because earlier in our CSS, we used less to compile the fact out that we don't want a border radius on any of our elements, except for ones that we specifically select. So that works. Next thing we need to do is add our page content. So we'll open up a header element. Since this is sort of going to be the header or the heading of our article. And we'll give that header element a class of page header. All right, that looks good. Now, we'll open up an h1 and give that a span with a class of icon rocket. So this is going to use our Font Awesome icon fonts to achieve a rocket look right next to our page header. Rocket icon. Then we'll just give ourselves the title about our company. Save that. And we can see now that we do have our page header. And then we will open up an article. So this is actually going to be our article content. And I'm just going to paste in some page content here. So we opened up an article with a class of column medium 8. We don't really need to change this whenever the screen goes smaller. We anticipate that this is going to stretch the full width of our mobile devices whenever we're on something like an iPhone. So right now at a column medium 8, that's what we're looking for. We're also going to include a sidebar within our page content and within this page container. Our sidebar will be a column medium 4, so 4 plus 8 of course is 12. So we've added up to that 12th grid, and this will fit within our row. One more thing is we do need to place a row within all of this. So we'll open up a div with a class of row, and we will close that out by commenting our row. And paste that down past the end of all of our content. All right, so we refresh, and there we have it. This looks good. We do need to, however, change the color of our text and make sure that our pictures are working. Let's take a look at the code. And we can see that our image, we no longer need that holder folder, so I can just save that, refresh, and there is our image. You should take note that we did use a special type of list or menu on the side, and this can be used for things like navigation, but it's also just really nice looking UI for lists. And this is called a Bootstrap list group. All right, and if you need to find out a little bit more about that list group, head over to the Bootstrap site, getbootstrap.com/components. Let's see what we have in our sidebar. We go down and there it is, list group. So you can kind of see what they're doing here with list group. You can add things like badges, and that's already sort of pre-done for you. We can link different items within that. And we can also just add custom content. So these are flexible. These are really nice things to have on your sidebar, and they really feature content well. And they're rather unique looking. They look a lot like your brand. It's something that kind of stands out. Let's head back over to our site and we'll refresh. And there we have it. Let's get styling on our content. Let's finish out our About page by adjusting the styling and making sure that we're in proper sync with our branding. So the first thing that we're going to do is, of course, this text is a little bit hard to read on a nice picturesque background. It's dark text, it doesn't really work, but this sort of white color here, that does kind of work, so let's make use of that. So our page content within our main.less file, remember we're going to use less to compile this file out, and we're going to use that to place upon our site. So right below page content, let's open up another one and call that page header, because that's what we need to adjust. And we'll take that, and I'm going to give the page header, I'm going to give those the H1 a color of EA, that border bottom of 1 pixel, and we'll kind of fade out black there. We'll want to make that a little bit nice and dark, but still sort of see-through. Fade out black. And we'll fade that out by 80%. So we're going to perform that less calculation to make sure that we fade out black by 80%. We'll give that a margin top. I don't really want a margin top on the page header. We don't need it. Margin top of 0. And let's save that. And so after we've compiled, we no longer have the margin top. We have that kind of nice faded look. And of course, our title is that nice sort of grayish EA color. I like that. It's kind of subtle, but it still looks pretty good. Next thing that we need to do is adjust the H1 itself. I want to do a little bit more work there. So the H1, I'm going to give that one another margin top of 0. We'll see how that looks. Perfect. You know what? It looks like our Font Awesome icon font is not appearing. Let's go find what the problem is. Head back over to the about.html. We have the H1 with the span with the class of icon rocket. That looks good. Oh, and our class is actually written wrong, so we need one more S in that class. We need to be able to identify that as a class. Save that and refresh, and there is our icon font. That's good news. Let's head back over to our main.less. The next thing that we need to do is adjust that. So we'll take the span there. We can just make that a generalization. Since we're already within the page header, we know that we're looking for the span, and you can place that span within that page header bracket, and less is going to auto-compile that out to make sure that it's in the right spot in your CSS. So we'll add there a margin right of 0.5 em. So we wanted about half a letter over. We want that to look about right, and that looks good. So after we refreshed, we've compiled, of course, and there it is, 0.5 em away from about our company. Next thing is I do want to fade out that color. I don't want it to be so bold. And so we'll go color, and I'll say fade out. Remember, this is a less function. It's a part of Bootstrap, but it's also just a really good thing to use in your day-to-day CSS. You can maybe try out less or another pre-compiling language called Sass or Stylus. And we'll fade that out by 70%. Save that. Oh, that looks pretty good. So we've kind of made that a little bit more subtle, cleaned it up a little bit. It's not yet, because this is really what we want our reader to be looking at. It's the title, and we don't really care too much about the icon, but it's just a nice stylistic touch. Next thing we have, of course, is our main content, our color for that pieces of content, and we can adjust that. We could adjust it in our main.less, but we really don't need to. We don't need to override that. We need to replace that, since it's going to be something that's going to be site-wide. Everywhere where there's going to be page content, we want that lettering and that CSS to show that our words are going to be white. So we can head back over to the variables. Once we're in those variables, we can see that we have under scaffolding, our body background is a white, but we're actually really using an image there, so that doesn't matter. But our text color is a dark gray. So if we head back over to our site, we can see that that's the dark gray. We don't really need to use that, but we do want that sort of EA, the light gray color. So we'll make that, adjust that, and there's our final compile. And there we have it, our light gray font. That looks really, really nice. Last thing is we need to adjust our stay in touch. So for this one, this doesn't quite work for me. We need to adjust this to go with our footer the way that we want it. And remember that Bootstrap is entirely customizable. That's kind of the point about this. This is a good framework to start from, and then we can build our styles on top of that. So let's head back over to the main.less, into the foot, and I'm just going to paste in some code, then we can talk it through. So I have nav pills. That's sort of these pills found within our footer that we did earlier. We want to isolate that line item and then take any anchor tags within those line items. And then we're going to make that color a nice white. Whenever we hover over those, we're going to continue that color being white, but instead of having another white background on hover, we're going to actually darken the color 232323, which is a very dark gray color. We're going to darken that by about 3.5%. We want this kind of smoky darkness back there that'll look really, really nice. So once we save that, we've compiled successfully, and there we have it. Whenever we hover over our stay in touch links, it looks really, really nice. All right, the very last thing that we have to finish out our styling, of course, over here we have this nice dark breadcrumb area, and we need to make that same effect for ourselves. Once again, we're not necessarily going to do this within the main.less. We simply don't need to. Anywhere throughout the site, we want to make sure that this is done. So head over to the variables.less and we'll find our breadcrumbs. So there's breadcrumbs background. And for this background, we're going to perform another less function. We'll fade out that black by about 65%, so it's going to be nice and transparent. We're going to keep the rest of the settings though, because these really work sort of no matter what the background color. So that'll be a nice CCC and then our gray light color. So let's compile this. Looks like we need to adjust our anchor text within that. To do that, head over back to your main.less, since this is just for this instance, and we can isolate out our breadcrumb, the anchor within the breadcrumbs, and let's give that a color of CCC, a text decoration of none. We don't want any text decoration. On hover, so we'll press and colon hover. So this is giving less this hover selector, and it's going to intelligently place that at the end of our CSS so we know that it's cascading properly. On hover, we want to adjust that color to white, so we're going to lighten that. Then we'll give that text decoration a value of none one more time. And you want to do that and make sure, because in some browsers we do default to hovering and then returning anchors to that text decoration of an underline. But in this case, we're actually just on hover. We're lightening the color, so we're still giving the user that feedback. It's just a little bit more subtle in this case. So save, and there we have it. We have our CCC, so it's that nice sort of dark, and then anytime we hover over it, it looks really, really nice. We've completed the primary styling for our whole website. So from here, you could imagine how you could expand on this. You could create your contact page, your blog page. You could fill out the rest of your website and you'd be good to go. We've set up that base. And hopefully you've learned a few things about how to deal with Bootstrap and some of its components. And remember, if you ever do have any questions, do what I do in this case, and head over to the Bootstrap documentation. It's constantly being updated with great code examples that you can copy and paste right into your own designs and projects, and then customize yourself via the variables.less file and maybe creating your own main.less file or any other name you'd like to give it, and adding your own less code on top of your Bootstrap. In our next videos, we'll go over optimization and deployment onto a server, and how to get your website from your desktop onto the web. So when you're ready to dive in, head on to the next video.